Hello, I'm Stella, and welcome to day 9 of the Advent series. Today, my tea is white rose, and it is low caffeine, so I'm gonna have to drink more caffeine later. It's very smelly. That's too hot to drink. Okay. We'll do that later. This chapter is called Birth Pains. So she begins this chapter by talking about how there is a family graveyard by the house that she lives in. Which, not gonna lie, that's kind of freaky. I probably wouldn't live there just because graveyards kind of scare me at night. Anyways, but how she likes to take walks through the graveyard. She likes to look at the stones, and one of the things she pointed out was when two graves lie next to each other, the small one marked by a stone lamb or angel, and the other with the words beloved wife. Here you know that a newborn, perhaps only days or hours old, left the world as soon as they entered it, and their mother, weary of both body and soul, left with them. Even after years of seeing such things, I'm always shocked by both their existence and their normalcy. Birth may be natural, as they say, but it has never been safe. So when the scripture tells us that the time came for Mary to give birth, this is no small thing, especially in light of what the promised son was coming to do. So that kind of ties into, I think we talked about this yesterday. All the days are kind of blending together. But about how the son was promised to come or to be in Mary's womb, but God had to be faithful through his promise to where Mary wouldn't miscarry or even die giving birth. She gives us an example of what God promises to Eve, that her offspring will crush the head of the serpent. He tells her that her pain will greatly multiply, and in sorrow thou shalt bring forth children. A woman's attempt to cultivate life through her body will be marked by disappointment, pain, loss, and even death itself. So while Mary had the promise of a son, there was no accompanying promise of her own safety. In Revelation 12, the Apostle John sees a great fiery red dragon standing in front of a woman in labor, representing the devil. This red dragon will do anything to stop the promised son from coming into the world, and is a threatening presence hovering over them in the very moments of delivery. Even after the child is born safely, the dragon continues to harass the woman, furious at her role in his birth. I like that she points out that parallel. God was totally faithful in protecting over Mary because obviously the devil didn't want his promised son to be born. I mean, it goes against his entire plan. So when Mary answered the call of God with, I am the Lord's servant, may it be done to me according to your word, she agreed to a process that in an earthly sense had no guaranteed outcome. Beyond discomfort and pain, she also faced complications like preeclampsia, breech presentation, loss of blood, hemorrhaging of the uterine line, and the ever-present threat of an infection that could snatch her away even weeks after delivery. Today in the developing world, such things rarely lead to death, but for most of history, death was a constant companion to birth without regard to class, education, or social status. Then she gives us some examples like Jane Seymour and Catherine Parr, two of King Henry VIII's 6 wives, and then just like some famous authors, mothers who died giving birth to them. And she also adds that not that Mary was unaware of the risks, she had undoubtedly known women lost in childbirth, or at least heard the stories. And when she and Joseph traveled to Bethlehem, they likely passed in the vicinity of Rachel's tomb, which by that time had become something of a sacred site. The beloved wife of the patriarch Jacob, Rachel waited and longed for children, only to die while giving birth to her second son, as Genesis 35 records. When they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth, and her labor was difficult. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Oh, what a coincidence! Jacob set up a marker on her grave. It is the marker at Rachel's grave still today. Wow, you guys. God is so cool. They were literally going to Bethlehem. That's crazy. Then Hannah tells us that Mary's pain is not necessarily the point here. No more than any other suffering is an end in itself, because in the wisdom of God, the child she gives birth to will reverse the very thing that threatens her. In the wisdom of God, childbirth itself will become one of the ways we understand the promised Son's work in the world and within us. In the wisdom of God, we will be reborn through faith in Him. Then she reminds us, don't be mistaken, pain is real, but she says, so is faith in God's promises, and so is the joy that follows. So we not only have pain in our lives, and then in this world, but we are also supported by a God who loves us and redeems us. And we could only do that through a woman going through pain to have the child of God. And she points out that Luke says that she gave birth. After all the years, after all the waiting, after all the longing and disappointed dreams, after all the loss, all the pain, and all the struggle, the promised Son is finally here. He has come, and faith is made sight. Okay, now before we hop in, let's talk about this tea, because I did just taste it, and it is cool enough. But I'm gonna taste it again. It's still pretty hot. It low-key just tastes how it smells, like dried roses. I'd say it's pretty good though. I would drink this on the regular. But as we've talked about, I'm not a very picky tea drinker. Alright, now we are hopping to 1 Timothy, where Paul alludes to the fall, writing that the woman Eve was deceived and transgressed, but she will be saved through childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with good sense. Now, if you're anything like me, that passage has always confused you, but she is explaining it very nicely by saying that some scholars suggest that he's combating the surrounding pagan culture that promised fertility goddess would keep women safe in childbirth. Instead of offering worship to Artemis, or Diana, as she was known to the Romans, Christian women were to look to God in faith, just as even Mary had done before them. And another possibility is that both men and women alike would be saved through the birth of the promised Son, a birth that will eventually break the curse that holds sway over birthing itself. In this sense, the curse of Genesis 3 is not God's final word, and to prove this, when the time came to completion, God sent his Son born of a woman. Now, I don't know if that made any sense to you, but it really cleared some things up, that just because you have a baby, because I knew that just because you have a baby doesn't mean you're saved, right? Because giving birth doesn't give you automatic faith. So that always confused me. But we are saved through the birth of God's Son. So yeah. She says, perhaps it seems odd that God would use the woman who was deceived to bring the one who would crush the deceiver. But this is a mystery of God's work, and even more unexpected is the fact that Jesus likens his own death to what a woman experiences when she gives birth. You will become sorrowful, Jesus tells his disciples just hours before he is crucified. But your sorrow will turn to joy. When a woman is in labor, she has pain because her time has come. But when she has given birth to a child, she no longer remembers the suffering because of the joy that a person has been born into the world. Isn't it so awesome that God literally created Jesus to save us? Because we suck. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. We really suck at not sinning. That is everyone's biggest flaw. Okay, and then a paragraph to wrap this up says, referring to Jesus, and having been born through the suffering of another, we enter, referring to us, about Jesus, and about how we have been reborn through suffering. We enter into suffering the same way he did, entrusting ourselves to the Father and believing that we are being guarded by God's power through faith for a salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. You rejoice in this, even though now, for a short time, if necessary, you suffer grief in various trials, so that the proven character of your faith may result in praise, glory, and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. The end. What a great Devo on the suffering that Mary went through to have Jesus, so that Jesus could suffer for us, so that we could be saved, so now we can give ourselves to in full obedience to God so then we can suffer for his cause. Yeah. What a long line of suffering and joy. Because don't you ever do something you really don't want to do, but then in the end, you realize that it was great. But yeah, I think that's all for today. You guys have a good Tuesday, and I'll see you tomorrow. My goodness, not her offering. Ugh! Just in childbirth. Hurtful.